There is a specific memory that many of us carry, often tucked away in the quiet corners of our childhood or early adulthood. It is the memory of a moment when you were simply being yourself, perhaps laughing a little too loudly, crying over something others found small, or asking a question that went just a bit too deep. And then, you were met with the phrase that felt like a door slamming shut. You were told that you were too sensitive. You were told to calm down. You were told, perhaps not in words but in glances, that your emotions were taking up too much space. For those of us who navigate the world with a high degree of emotional intensity, this feedback loop becomes a defining part of our identity. We start to believe that there is a fundamental error in how we are built. We look around at others who seem to glide through life with an easy, detached coolness, and we wonder why we cannot just be like them. We wonder why we feel everything at such a high volume when the rest of the world seems to be operating on a gentle hum. If you have ever felt like you are simply too much for the people around you, or if you constantly feel the need to apologize for the depth of your reactions, I want you to know that you are not broken. You are not a mistake to be fixed. You are simply experiencing a depth of processing that is both a burden and a profound gift. Let us look at what is actually happening when you feel this way. Over time, many sensitive people develop what we might call the shrinking strategy. This is a learned behavior, a survival mechanism that you likely adopted very young. Somewhere along the line, you realized that your full, unfiltered self was overwhelming to the people in your immediate environment. Perhaps your parents did not have the emotional tools to handle big feelings, or perhaps your peer group valued conformity over depth. To maintain your connection to them, to stay safe and loved, you learned to edit yourself. You began to monitor your own volume. You learned to hold back your excitement, to swallow your tears, and to curate your words so they would be palatable to others. You became an expert at reading the room, sensing the emotional temperature, and adjusting your own behavior to ensure you did not disturb the peace. But this strategy of shrinking comes at a terrible cost. When you spend your life trying to fit into a space that is too small for you, you live in a state of constant, low-grade suffocation. You feel exhausted, not because you have done physically hard work, but because the act of repression requires a tremendous amount of energy. It is helpful to understand this intensity not as a dramatic performance, but as a difference in processing. Psychologically and biologically, sensitive people often have a nervous system that takes in more information from the environment. You are like a high-resolution camera in a world that is often content with grainy snapshots. You see the micro-expressions on a friend's face. You hear the tone of voice that contradicts the words being spoken. You feel the atmosphere of a room the moment you walk into it. This is not you being dramatic. This is you perceiving more data. When you process more data, you naturally have a larger reaction. If you see more vivid colors, you will be more moved by the sunset. If you feel the subtle shifts in a relationship, you will be more grieved when a connection fades. The problem is not your reaction. The problem is that we live in a culture that often values efficiency and surface-level functioning over depth and slow processing. We are taught that emotions should be tidy, logical, and quickly resolved. But your internal world is not tidy. It is vast, and it is complex. This brings us to the cycle of apology that often dominates the life of a sensitive person. You might notice that you say you are sorry constantly. You apologize for crying. You apologize for needing reassurance. You apologize for writing a long text message instead of a short one. You are essentially apologizing for your existence. You are saying, "I am sorry that I am difficult. I am sorry that I require effort." This reflex comes from the belief that you are a burden. But I invite you to consider a different perspective. What if your intensity is not a flaw, but a filter? When you show up as your full self, you will inevitably repel people who prefer the surface. This is painful, certainly, but it also protects you from filling your life with shallow connections that will never truly satisfy you. Conversely, your intensity is a beacon for the people who are looking for depth. There are people in this world who are hungry for the very things you are trying to hide. There are people who want to have the long conversation, who want to sit with the big emotions, who want to explore the complexities of the human experience. When you shrink yourself, you hide your light from the very people who are looking for it. You end up surrounded by people who tolerate a watered-down version of you, rather than people who would celebrate the real version. It is also vital to reframe what we mean by too much. Usually, when someone implies you are too much, what they are actually saying is that they do not have the capacity to hold your experience. Imagine you are pouring a gallon of water. If you try to pour that water into a teacup, it will overflow. It will make a mess. The owner of the teacup might get angry and say you are pouring too much. But the problem is not the amount of water. The problem is the size of the container. You are an ocean trying to fit into a teacup. The solution is not to dry up the ocean. The solution is to stop trying to pour yourself into containers that cannot hold you. This does not mean you should blame the people with the teacups. They have their own capacities, their own limits, and their own stories. It simply means you must recognize the mismatch. You can love the people in your life who cannot handle your depth, but you may need to stop going to them for the kind of deep understanding they are unable to provide. You can learn to discern who has the capacity to sit with you in the deep end and who is better suited for the shallow waters. Both types of relationships have value, as long as you do not expect the shallow ones to save you from drowning. Let us look at how this manifests in your daily life. You might feel a lingering sense of loneliness even when you are with friends because you are only showing them the 10% of yourself that you deem acceptable. You might feel a sudden spike of anxiety after a social interaction, replaying everything you said, convinced you were annoying or overwhelming. This is the hangover of the shrinking strategy. It is the anxiety of a person who is constantly performing. There is a profound freedom that waits for you on the other side of this fear. Imagine what it would feel like to retire the role of the easygoing, low-maintenance person. Imagine what it would be like to accept that you are, in fact, high maintenance in the best possible way. A high-performance sports car is high maintenance. A beautiful, complex garden is high maintenance. High maintenance means you require care, attention, and specific conditions to thrive. There is no shame in that. As you move through your week, I invite you to try a very small, private practice. It is a form of checking in with yourself. When you feel the familiar wave of emotion rising, the sadness, the joy, the frustration, and you feel the immediate impulse to shove it down or apologize for it, just pause. Take one breath, and in that breath, say to yourself, I am allowed to feel this. I am allowed to take up this space. You do not have to say it out loud. You do not have to cause a scene. Just internally grant yourself the permission that the world has denied you. You can also practice discerning your containers. Before you share something vulnerable, ask yourself, does this person have the emotional capacity to hear me right now? If the answer is no, that is okay. It does not mean they are a bad person or that you are alone. It just means you might need to write that feeling down in a journal first, or take it to a friend who speaks your language, or simply sit with it yourself until the wave passes. You are learning to be the steward of your own intensity, rather than the victim of it. Finally, consider the possibility that your sensitivity is the source of your greatest strengths. The same trait that makes you cry easily is the trait that allows you to be a deeply empathetic friend. The same trait that makes you overwhelmed by loud noises is the trait that allows you to notice the beauty in a piece of music, or the way the light hits the trees. You cannot selectively numb your feelings. If you numb the pain and the overwhelm, you also numb the joy and the awe. To be a person who feels things deeply is a brave way to live. It requires courage to keep your heart open in a world that can be harsh. But the alternative is to close yourself off, to become numb, to drift through life without ever really touching it. You have chosen, consciously or not, to live fully. You have chosen the high-resolution life. So the next time you feel like you are too much, remember the ocean. The ocean is vast, and it is powerful, and it can be overwhelming. But no one looks at the ocean and says it should be smaller. They simply stand in awe of it, or they learn how to swim. You are not too much. You are just vast. And there is room in this world for all of you. How would it feel to walk into a room today and decide that you do not need to shrink? What would happen if you trusted that the right people will not be scared away by your depth, but will be grateful to finally find someone real?